Hello, pen people. Coming back today to talk about fountain pens, but today we're going to explore the topic of a flagship fountain pen. What is the flagship pen for a particular brand? That was the subject of a Reddit post that came up recently, and they tried to determine what the flagship pen were for a bunch of modern pen makers. What is it, though? What makes a pen their flagship? It's very rare that you will find a company that will actually come out and say, this is our flagship pen. But there are some that do. So the question is, what is the flagship pen for all of these different brands, and what is it that makes it the flagship? It seems to me that there are three different things. One, it could be the size of the pen. They tend to be the largest pen in the pen line. Also, they tend to be the most expensive, but sometimes it's the iconic nature of the pen that makes it the flagship. And so let's dive into these, first starting with vintage pens. Here we have a bunch of vintage pens, and one of the problems with these vintage pens and these storied brands, so here we have Wall Eversharp, Schaefer, Parker, and they've been around for so long, it's very difficult to say what was the iconic or most, the flagship pen for that line. Well, they were around for so long, it kind of depends on what time period you're talking about. But I don't know that I have any of the, what would have been the absolute flagship pen for any time period. I'm just going to make some guesses at what might have been depending on the time period. Let's look at Wall Eversharp here. I've got three of them. These are a Skyline, a Doric, and one of their stenographer pens. I don't think any of these would have been considered a flagship. However, if you had one of these Dorics that was in a larger model, this one does have the adjustable nib, but if it's not a terribly large one, if you found one of these that was a much larger pen, then that would be, I think, considered the flagship pen for that time period. And the same goes for this. There's a larger version that would probably be the flagship pen. The same is true, for example, for Parker. I have a couple here that might have been the flagship pens for their time period, and it's these two right here. This is a large Parker dual-fold, and the dual-fold was the big pen of its time in its line. It has a nice large nib, great writing pens. This was probably the flagship for the time period it was around, but the dual-fold coexisted with the Vacuumatic for a certain period of time, and this is a large Vacuumatic. This is a nice big fat one. This was probably the flagship for its time. Again, a nice large dual-color nib there. So these are potentially a couple of the the flagships for their time period. Now, here we have some Schaefers and a Waterman and a couple others here, but let's looking at these Schaefers, for example. Early Schaefers, the flat tops, I just have this tiny one right here. They made much larger ones. The large ones were probably their flagship, quote unquote. During the era of the balance pens, which is this torpedo-shaped pen, they came in many, many different sizes, as you see here. Here we have four different sizes. We have this tiny little thing, a long, skinny one, and then a larger one. And this is a nice large pen, but it's not as big as these oversized pens. And these two, I'm pretty confident, were the flagships of their time. Very large balance pens, large, very nice nibs. These are great pens. So, a couple of flagships right there. And this was probably a flagship for its time. This is National Pen Co. Very large pen, big gold nib. And that seems to be the theme, is it's a large pen, and the height of quality. And during the 60s, this would have been Schaefer's, maybe the late 50s. I don't remember the time period of this PFMs, but this is the PFM. This is PFM 5, which means it's gold nib. Snorkel filler, fantastic pen. This was probably the flagship for its time period. Although, this is another thing. You could have a flagship model, but it may not be the most expensive of that model. So, for example, there was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this pen. This was the top of them, but there were others of these that were made of solid gold, and those would have been far more expensive than this one, but they are both as flagship model, even though this isn't the most expensive of them all. And that is going to hold true through all of these. You can have a flagship model, but it may not be the most valuable of those models because there are some one-offs and some special runs. But because they're special runs, because they're one-offs, they can't be the flagship because it's not the one that's there all the time. Okay, and I'm not going to say much about these other brands. This is a Venus. Venus was a very inexpensive pen company, usually in somewhere in in the second or at best second, but usually the third tier of pens. But this was their best one. This was the Venus. I think it was the 78, and it's the one that came with a gold nib. Most Venus pens had steel nibs and were kind of unremarkable, but this one came in a nice green celluloid. So I would think that this would have been Venus's flagship. And this was probably Schaefer's flagship during the war years. This is the Crest pen. Looked a lot like the Triumph, but came with an all-metal cap. Nice pen. But Waterman, I don't have any pen of Waterman's that I think would be a flagship model. I mean, during the safety era, they had many different sizes of pens. The larger it is, the higher the higher quality and more expensive it is. Which is the flagship? I don't know. I mean, is it the Model 48, which is the unobtainium version of this? This is a 46, and this is about as big as I've been able to find. It's a very large, very wonderful pen, very valuable, but maybe the 48 was the flagship. And of the lever fillers or eyedropper fillers, maybe the Model 20 was the one, because that's the one with the great big huge nib. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody out there can, has a better definition of what the flagship of a Waterman would have been. Okay, let's move on to modern pens. So I'm going to go alphabetically with the pens that I have. The Reddit list had a couple of pen brands before this one, but this is the first one alphabetically that I own. This is the Conid bulk filler. This is the king size, so this is what they identified as their flagship. It is the most expensive one of the list that I've seen of theirs. It has the large number 8 nib. This one's in gold. Nice ebonite feed. This is a fantastic pen. It is also quite expensive, and it's a fitting flagship. And just to kind of compare, and we'll talk about this one later, but it is almost exactly the same size as the Mont Blanc flagship, which is the 149. Okay, next one is Conklin. Now, on the list from Reddit, they said that the Mark Twain is the flagship pen of the modern Conklin family, and I would say that that's probably true, but I have two of them here. This is the standard Mark Twain in a clear version. You can see the sack in there and the crescent filler mechanism. But this one is in sterling silver. So does that mean that this isn't a flagship pen? That only this one is? This is the kind of that materials issue. They're both the same model, but one of them is sterling silver and the other one is just the standard model. They're both flagships. This one just happens to be in a nicer material. Anyway, that's Conklin. The next one that I have is Keras. Okay, Keras, I think, is an underappreciated brand. They make some really nice pens. These early Townsends had nibs made by Pelican. They write really well. And their flagship pen is the Peerless. This is the Peerless, and in platinum finish. And this one had all these Peerlesses have a nib made by Sailor. So they are fantastic writing pens. Far better in hand than you would expect. They're just wonderful. Next, we're looking at Keras Customs. Had to pan back out a little bit for this. So Keras makes a lot of different fountain pens. They have the Vertex, which I should have grabbed one of those too, but I just have a few here. This is their Fountain K model. Comes in a couple of different finishes. This is their an aluminum one that's got some special branding on it and such. This one's made out of solid copper, but it's been treated to patina, called a shipwreck model. But this is one of their original fountain pens. Later they came out with the ink, and this is what they call their flagship pen. The Decograph, however, comes close. It is also a very nice pen. Actually falls in a very similar price range. This one has a gold nib. Very nice pen, slightly smaller form factor, but this is what Keras calls their flagship. And it comes in a lot of different materials. I actually have one more rolling around out somewhere, but these three are made out of aluminum. This one has a copper section, and you could get them with different section materials. This one, I believe, is also copper with a titanium nib. And this one is the Chupacabra, which has, again, a different section, but it's made out of aluminum, and it's just kind of interesting. This is their flagship model. It's the biggest one. And in this one, this is, I believe, the most expensive one they ever put out, which is the solid copper in their shipwreck finish. But a close second behind that is this one model they made in bronze. This is the only one they made in bronze. It's quite heavy. The clip, instead of being stainless steel like it is on this one's titanium. And it's just a sweet opening pen. Beautiful, beautiful pen. Insanely heavy. And this is their flagship. Next up is Lamy. The Reddit said that this is their flagship pen, the 2000. And this is one where if it is the flagship for Lamy, it's because of its iconic status. This pen has been around for a very long time, since the mid-60s. It's still being made. It's still a fantastic pen. It's great. There are other versions of it, such as this one in stainless steel. It's the same pen, just solid stainless steel. If this is their flagship, great, but they have more expensive pens. Of course, they have cheaper pens like this Safari and this Ion. This is a more expensive pen. The twist opening Dialogue 3. I love this pen. I'll pick this one up all day long before I'll pick these two up. It just works better for me. Beautiful, large gold nib. But they say this one's the flagship, and so there we go. Next on the Reddit list is the Mont Blanc. This is the 146. This is the 149. You can see again that is much larger. Look under the hood here, and you can see that the nibs are considerably different. This one's smaller, much larger nib with the 149. The big, large ebonite feed, fantastic writing pen. It is a worthy flagship pen. However, there are much more expensive pens from Mont Blanc, like their Writer series and other homage pens. But again, those are models that come out infrequently. This is the one that carries the brand, forward the best, I think, because it's such a good pen. And it's available and has been available, like the Lamy 2000, since the 60s or even before. I'm not a historian, but I know it's been around since at least the 60s. Fantastic pen, great flagship. Now, this one kind of stands on its own. The Namiki Emperor is the flagship for the brand Namiki. It is the largest pen that they make. There are maquillé versions of this that have fantastic artwork on them that go well into the tens of thousands of dollars for the pen. The least expensive versions of this still hover in the $2,000 range. Amazing, gigantic thumb of a nib there. A worthy flagship for any brand. And just a massive thing. I mean, you compare it to even something like the Mont Blanc 149, it dwarfs it. And the 149 is not an insignificant pen. The only pens that come close to the size of the Namiki Emperor are some of the pens from India. These monsters, we'll talk about these later. But there are some Indian pens that come close to the same size. And there even are some Japanese pens. These giant pens from... these jumbo pens or whatever they're called. I mean, these were kind of done as gags, I guess. But they are also very large. But of course, nothing like the Emperor. The Emperor is a fantastic eyedropper filler that's got that valve that opens up on the bottom here. Anyway, of flagships, this is the flagship of all of my flagships. The Emperor pretty much stands alone. Now, the Reddit list included a brand that I didn't expect to find on their list, but it's this, Namsu. I have 3 different versions. There's the N2, which is their cool pocket pen. Number 6 size nib, stainless steel and aluminum, held in there with O-rings. Great pen. This is the Ixion. Beautiful pen, brass section, nicely weighted, good pen. But my favorite of them, and the one that Reddit said is their flagship, is the Nova. Now, the Nova comes in many different materials. This is the brushed titanium and with a titanium nib. And this is one of my favorite pens of all of my pens. Beautiful writer, fantastic pen, great in the hand, and a worthy flagship for Namsu. Now, the Reddit said that the pen for Parker is their dual fold Centennial, which is roughly the same size as this dual fold Senior here. Large pen. I I don't have a modern one, so we're just going to have this ancient one stand in for it. They're large pens. They have good nibs. Not as big as this one, though. The modern ones have number 6 nibs, and this one is bigger than that. The modern ones, I think, personally, I think are a little bit overpriced for some of the models, but they are a beautiful pen, and they are still made, and that's a wonderful thing. And now you might have guessed what's coming up next, and this is Pelican. These are 3 different Pelican pens. This is the M300, the 400NN, the 800, and as you can tell, the numbers are going up. Their flagship, which is here, the M1000, and it is larger than the 800 and all these others. Obviously, you can see that there's quite a difference in size. All of the nibs are of a commensurate size difference as well. The nib on this M1000 is a beast. Great big thing, and beautifully soft and wonderful to write with. So the flagship for Pelican, the M1000. And again, there are other versions, Mach-E versions and others that cost more than the standard one, but this is the flagship model. So for Pilot, there is some controversy about what their flagship model is. I think that it really shouldn't be any controversy whatsoever. You know, I have other models of Pilot pens. I didn't pull them all out. I've got the 823 and a couple of others. This is their lowly but wonderful Metropolitan. But the Custom Urushi is a fantastic pen, and it writes differently than any other Pilot pen out there. Yes, it is made by the same company that makes the Emperor that we just saw. Let me grab it here. Sorry, my chair is squeaking. And you can see that it is not in the same size class as the Emperor, but it is a very large pen. There are quite a few pens that don't even compare to how big this thing is. Again, here's the Mont Blanc 149. You know, they just increase in scale here. But of the regular Pilot line, not the Namiki line, this is the flagship, and it is a worthy flagship. Urushi black lacquer, gold trim, and this fantastic, soft, expressive nib. There's nothing quite like it. It is a much better writing experience than even the Emperor is. Beautiful, beautiful pen. A wonderful flagship for Pilot. So on the Reddit list, the next brand is Sailor. And Sailor makes some fantastic pens, of course, and anybody who's been in the fountain pen world for anything more than a couple of seconds knows Sailor and knows how wonderful they are. This is their standard Pro Gear. This is the Chelana, which is no longer made, but I just wanted to show that there's, you know, a breadth of what they make. It's not just the constantly changing colors, but they also have different sizes of pens. They have rounded end pens that are different, names, but similar sizes. And the flagship is the king of pen, and the name basically says that it's the flagship. It is the large pen that they make with the very large nib. To compare to the standard nib from Sailor, you can see that it is much larger. And, of course, they make fantastic nibs, but you can see how much larger the king of pen is. And, of course, that's just for kicks and for giggles, how tiny the Chelana nib is there. The king of pen is truly a king. Fantastic writing pens. If you can get one, do so. So the Reddit didn't include any other brands, but I'm going to well, this was the last one they included, sorry. TWSBI, and they said that the Diamond 580 is their flagship pen, and that may be true. It is, the pen that they, that usually gets mentioned. It's this, good piston filling pen. This one's kind of messed up at the moment. I think it needs some work down here at the bottom. For some reason, the piston has unscrewed itself and gotten stuck up there. Yeah, like it did it itself. I probably did it and left it that way. Anyway, piston filling pens, fantastic. However, they have a larger pen, which is the VAC 700. For my money, this is the better pen, and it's what I would call their flagship, but sorry, it's got a Jinhao nib on there. Ignore that. One of the things that's nice about these TWSBIs is they're swappable. You can take them apart and do different things with them. The biggest one is the 700. More valuable, though, are some of their limited series. This is the Aurora, which has the same guts as the 580. But the question is which, it's not the Eco. The Eco's their inexpensive pen, but which is their flagship? And I guess it's the 580 because it's the most iconic. But there are other versions that may be better. But again, that's just kind of illustrative of how flagships are considered. So anyway, moving on to brands that they didn't list but should have. So Platinum should have been listed. Platinum is another brand like Pilot that has two different lines. They have their standard line, the Platinum line, and then they have their higher end line, which is Nakaya. And there's some fantastic Nakaya pens out there, but I don't own one. Their least expensive, of course, is the Preppy, which is basically a throwaway pen. Although I've had this one for many years. It's been filled with Bay State Blue since I got it with a bottle of Bay State Blue. I can't believe it's still around. But their most well-known pen and their standard line, I think, is probably this, the 3776. Fantastic pen. They have their seal cap in there, beautiful gold nibs. This is one of the soft ones, got some bounce to it. But the top of that line is the President. The President is a larger pen than the 3776, just a little bit larger. The nibs aren't much larger, but they're different markings and such on them. And I have to say, until I got this pen last week or so, I didn't think it would be any different from the 3776, so I resisted. There's something about this pen that's pretty magical. It's a fantastic writing pen. I'm glad I've got it now. So this is the Flagship for Platinum, I believe. These are the only diplomats I have, and for that reason, I kind of think that the Arrow is probably the flagship pen for Diplomat. It might not be, but for a lot of people, this would be, because they have some cheaper pens out there, or ones that cost the same, but this is the one that seems to me to be the most iconic of the brand. It's beautiful. It's got that Zeppelin shape. This is the stainless steel, the steel nib. This is the factory finish with a gold nib. Both are fantastic pens. If you haven't tried one, you probably should. And I think that this is the worthy flagship for that brand. So panning back a little bit, this is going to be somewhat controversial. This is Moonman, or Mahjong as they're also known. How can a brand that basically copies other pen designs, like their copy of the Leonardo and their copy, it's not a particularly great copy either, of the Pilot Vanishing Point, have a flagship? Well, they do have some iconic designs that are their own and that they didn't copy. This is the C4, which is a fantastic Japanese-style eyedropper pen. Incredibly beautifully writing pen. This one right here is the Q1, which is another great writing pen and eyedropper only. Fantastic pens, really. But this is the one I would call their flagship. This is the TI 200, or it's based on the Model 200, which is usually a stainless steel flighter pen with a 14-karat gold nib based on the Parker 51. And it does have a gold nib, but this one is made out of solid titanium. And these are great writing pens. They work at least as well as my vintage Parkers do, and I've got a couple of them. This one writes just as well, and it has a gold nib. It's not, I would get rid of this one before I got rid of those, but it's a decent pen, and for the brand, I think it's great. Is it their flagship? I don't know. I haven't asked them, and that's the truth about all of these. I don't really know which of them, other than Keras, actually has a flagship brand. So, for example, getting into Tebaldi, you know, at least in the listing of pens that are available in America, this is the most expensive one. This is the Tebaldi Bononia. Wonderful pen. I think it's worthy of being their flagship. The materials are fantastic, a really good piston filling mechanism, and that nib is worthy of praise. Look at that thing, that eagle. Gorgeous thing. Only available on this model. That's why I think it is their flagship. So I'm going to say that. Tebaldi, Bononia, piston filler, that's their flagship. Noveler or Narwhal, whatever they call themselves, I don't know what they would consider their flagship, but right now it might be this one. This is the Nautilus, great pen, but who knows? They have so many pens that are fairly inexpensive. Who knows if that's their top one, but for me, it is. This is the Penlux Masterpiece. They really only have a couple of different pens out there right now, at least in the American market. But this is the bigger one. It's 149 size. This one's got a nice Bach gold nib in it. Great piston filling pen. Very similar, again, to the 149. Not exactly the same, slightly different, styling cues, but it's a very good pen. And let's just say for Penlux, that's their, the Masterpiece is their top of the line. Another brand that I only have one pen of right now, and that is this Gravitas. Gravitas is an Irish brand, makes some great pens. For me, the bigger and more expensive pens on their line, and this is the one they really got known for, was this kind of torpedo-shaped pen. This is the skull one out of stainless steel. I think this might be considered their flagship, but we could probably ask them. How about Stipula? Now, Stipula has a bunch of different pens out there. The one that they're really well known for, though, is this shape here, which is the Etruria shape, and they have many different versions of it. But the piston filling versions with gold nibs seem to be kind of their iconic ones. I have a Suprema out there, which is another one. Saying what pen is their flagship is something we probably should ask of them, but they do have some pens that are worthy of being considered a flagship. And it's odd how many of them come into the same dimensions as the 149. It's just kind of an iconic size and shape. Maybe that's the telling feature. I'm not sure. Just to be kind of funny, how about the flagship for noodlers? Like a brand like that could have a flagship. I would say, though, that it's the Triple Tail. I would have said that it was the Neponset, but the Neponset's a miserable, is for most people that I know who've had them, have had a miserable time with them. But the Triple Tail fixes all of the failures of the Neponset, and it is a great writing pen. It doesn't come in the material choices as the Neponset, but is a better writing pen. And if you can combine the two, fantastic. Now, I only have one Newton pen, and it's this one, this very large Prospector. He makes a lot of different pens, but these are the ones that I've seen that are the most expensive. It's the large Prospectors. This is a Chatterley Luxuries exclusive with a very large number 8 keyhole nib. Very expensive, 4-digit pen, and this may be Sean Newton's flagship. I don't know. Again, ask him. And then just wrap it up with a couple more here. ASE, or Armando Cinnamoni Club, has a bunch of flagship type pens. All of them are fantastic, but this is the one they got started with. At least in in most people, when they think of Armando Cinnamoni, they think of the Bologna Extra. The Bologna Extra. This fantastic Arco pen, gorgeous, huge number 8 nib. Ebonite feed, beautiful writing pen, beautiful, just a stunning pen. It's hard to imagine something that this isn't a flagship for them, but, maybe they have a different, maybe the Triangulo is their flagship now. I'm not sure, but for me, this is the pen I think of when I think of Armando Cinnamoni Club, and I think that is kind of the essence of a flagship pen. It's the pen you think of when you think of that brand. And this is the one for me. And let's just wrap it up with those monster Indian pens we saw earlier. This one is from a company called Guider. And this is the Super Zimbo. This is their largest pen, monster of a pen. I know I have seen these with number 8, or even some that are called number 10 size nibs. This number 6 is dwarfed by the size of the pen, but it works. And sorry, ignore the ball bearing in there. I use that to agitate ink in these great big eyedroppers. This one here is for Gamma's largest pen. This is the Gamma Supreme, again, telling you that it is their flagship. Monster of a pen, again, a number 6 size nib, and this huge, huge pen. These are great writing pens, too, by the way. And this is a company called Kim ACR. This is their biggest. It is called the Jumbo Double. Again, like these others, has a large number 6 size nib with an ebonite feed, but it also has a very cute little number 4 or 5 size nib at the bottom here. They have separate filling mechanisms. They hold a different color of ink if you want. And again, I would say that for this particular brand, this is their flagship. I may be wrong on everything I've said here today, but I think flagship pens are a lot of fun. They tend to be the pens that will work and work well and work for a very long time because they carry that brand in the minds of their users and into the future. So have fun. Try a flagship pen. You might like one.